Would you rather die of a neurological problem like dementia or Parkinson, or would you rather die from a sudden death, heart attack? You don't have time to say bye-bye to anybody. Or would you rather die through organ failure, which is, cardiac, kidney, or liver failure, which is essentially ups and downs. You don't know when the final down is going to come, but it's kind of coming, but you're just losing. Whereas cancer often gives you our ability to prognosticate precisely with cancer is actually the disease where we're most able to give a precise diagnosis. For a long time, I was looking for the reason I got cancer, and most patients do, the why question.
Hello and welcome everyone to the It's Never About Money podcast. It's been some time since I've recorded, and I've got a very special episode here today, and a bit of a family connection as well. And I'll start with perhaps leading with an introduction to my cousin from Montreal, Dr Alain Bestavros. He is a leading oncologist and haematologist based in Montreal, as I said, and he's got a medical degree from McGill University and specialises in haematology and specifically as well oncology. He's been a cornerstone at the Integrated Cancer Centre of Laval since 2013. He's known for his compassionate patient care and innovative research. He also serves as an adjunct clinical professor at the University of Montreal. And Alain has a very keen interest, which is why I really wanted to have a conversation with him around stress and its impact on cancer patients, and how stress can affect many individuals. And so I really want to have a chat about that. And interestingly as well, as if that isn't enough, Alain is also holding a law degree and an active member of the Quebec Bar, and finally a president of the Quebec Physicians Assistance Program, which is really all about helping physicians improving their own health and well-being. So welcome, Alain.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Obviously, my father and your mother are cousins, and I kind of wondered why, as an Egyptian migrant, when you think about the universe of possibilities, when you think about the amount of heat, the weather, the certain culture that exists in Egypt, would these two lines of the Stefan family on my side would decide to go Montreal, which can be one of the coldest places I've ever ventured into, and then Melbourne, which is 4 seasons in one day.
That's a great thought, and I can't say that I haven't thought about it before. I have. I think my family, my parents, and other cousins and other uncles chose Montreal because of the French connection, right? Because back in the day, when Egypt was colonized by the French left very good schools, and so specifically schools mostly attended by the Christian minority of Egypt, of which our family belongs, to which our family belongs, and so I think our parents and in some cases our grandparents went to French schools, and so Montreal being a French city in North America, the biggest essentially, they moved there.
I feel like you've answered that very well, and if the question was asked why Melbourne, there's certainly no French connection.
So what is the connection?
Yeah, what is the connection? It's a good question.
It's the weather.
It might be. I don't know. But that's a good one. And it's funny. I this particular episode is kind of personal on a number of fronts as well, because not only are we obviously related, but also my father had a very difficult time with cancer as well, and it's one of the topics that we're going to broach a little bit about. And I think some of the aspects of his journey have definitely left an indelible mark for me on the way I run my life and the things that I think about. So we've had conversations before, about this, and so I find your insights really impactful. But I also wanted to ask you, because in Melbourne, you talk about the sort of connection to the French. And so how many languages do you speak? And in the family, are there anyone who speaks the most languages?
More languages. Many of us speak three languages: the English, French. Montreal is very bilingual
Yeah.
in general. So most Montrealers manage in English and French, and I have still Arabic. I left Egypt when I was 10 years old, so I kept some Arabic, at least the oral Arabic. Written
Yes.
and reading, I'm not that strong, but I think we're lucky to bridge both, from Egypt to a new continent. I think we got in in some angle lucky to be aware of both and to be able to understand both.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that I think as an Australian we don't. There are some people, of course, that speak many different languages in Australia. Like it's not complete, but the general tendency when you see someone from Montreal as an example, they're always very much likely to be at least bilingual. So I find that really amazing. I also just wanted to sort of start with, why the, moving from say law. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the journey from law to sort of being a doctor and why you chose to go down that field.
My dad is a lawyer. Was a lawyer. Now he
Yeah.
passed away. But my dad was a lawyer and a good one. Somebody who really loved law and the theory of law. And so, as a child, he wouldn't stop talking to me about and law and rules and we had inherited a farm in Egypt, and we had numerous legal problems of many natures. So he would keep on telling me about all those. So I grew up in an environment where I was exposed to a lot of law and loved it, in fact. And so when it came time to apply, I was hesitating between both. I applied to medicine and got into medicine, but I kept this love of law. And at some point in our curriculum, in medical curriculum, they told us that we should be taking extra medical courses to kind of broaden our horizons and see other stuff. And so I took law classes on the side, medical legal kind of responsibility, and I loved those classes. And later on, between medical school and residency, for reasons that we might explore a bit later in this podcast, I took some time off, and I used this time to finish my law degree. I wanted to still be doing something, but not necessarily medical. So I used that time to finish my law degree.
I've kind of got two questions. One is what innately is in you to have wanted to go down the medical route because you did that after the law, but then also how the law sort of background and the medical background, has there been any interesting and sort of crossovers that have assisted you in what you do as an oncologist?
There is quite a bit a big intersection between medicine and law, and it's a
Yeah.
growing one. It's a growing one. Whether it's medical responsibility, so patients who question what the doctors have done, and want to hold the doctor or the hospital or the medical system responsible for whatever damage or they might have sustained. And also there's all these also the laws also pertains to the administrative structure of the system,
Mhm.
how the different pieces of the puzzle of the medical system intersect, who's responsible of what. And so that's another field that in which medicine and law intersect.
And to your decision that you made to actually go into medicine, was there anything as a young man, that you felt compelled to do it? Like, why'd you go down that path?
Very young, I can remember that our parents, especially my father, used to tell me that if you help people, if you do something good, don't worry about anything else. Everything else will come. Everything else being money. So, for example, as one of the big things, and so he would tell me, never aim at money or success per se. Aim at doing good, and don't worry about the rest. It will come. And I think this message of my dad stayed in my mind. That in fact I reread what my dad had told me many decades later. This is very similar to what Viktor Frankl says in the search of Man's Search of Meaning. Maybe
Yes.
I
Yes, I've
can
read
see
it.
you're nodding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a, I think even has a couple of quotes that are saying exactly that, which is the more you aim at success, the less you'll able to achieve it. Do something good, and everything else will follow. And so the idea of helping somebody who's sick in a time of needing help, I always been attracted to this idea.
Mm.
I had this interest in law, but deep inside me, I knew that I wasn't going to practice law. I thought that law was interesting and important
Mm.
to know in life in general. And I would
Yeah.
even push the argument to say that most people should be getting some kind of training in law, basic fundamental understanding of relationships,
Yeah.
uh, and so as consumers, you can be much better consumers and members of society in general, by having some legal education. So I knew I wanted to do medicine, and I always saw law as a side thing. So
I, I love your dad's advice. I mean, it's something that I've come to my own conclusion around as well. I just feel that the people that, yeah, they might be actually have come into quite a bit of wealth or have been able to become quite successful by modern measures. The reason for the success is often relating to their love of what they do, and often relating to a service that they're providing that is absolutely integral and gives back and helps. And the interesting thing about it being a doctor is that relationship between what you do and then what you see as an outcome is very clear and is very impactful. And that, I think, is very helpful because there are many occupations. I think most occupations in some way will be in service of someone, but there can be a more tenuous connection between what you do and then the impact in certain occupations. And I think in sort of the medical field specifically, whether you're a nurse or you're a doctor, or that impact is very clear. Would you agree?
yes, yes, absolutely. And within medicine and within the healthcare field as a whole, there's a huge spectrum depending on who you're attending to in terms of patient category, disease. In my case, as an oncologist, what's specific to oncology is that the number of patients is not that large.
Mm.
I have a few hundred patients at a time under my care, but the impact or the relationship that I have on those patients is with those patients is a very significant one. Patients do not forget their oncologists. It's something that, and I don't forget my patients because it's much more than a disease treat kind of scenario. It's often yes, we treat a disease, but we also face death. The prospect of death, at least the prospect, even if it's not the reality. And we have to juggle there together, and so we connect at a deeper level than in the usual or other medical relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably wanted to go on to something else, but what sort of triggered in my mind now was a conversation with a friend, and his father had recently been diagnosed with cancer, and one of the observations that we were sort of both having a conversation about was that you presume that your father is going to be around forever, or you kind of know maybe rationally that he won't, but there's no kind of time frame on that. And then when someone is diagnosed with cancer, then all of a sudden the family is faced with the reality that the time frame that was not in their mind is now very clear, or at least somewhat clear. And that can be really challenging, not just for the person that's afflicted by the illness, but the family as well, trying to work out, what are we going to do?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a saying in oncology. We say that when the patient has cancer, the family has cancer, and that's because cancer has such an impact on the life of the patient. Not only, I mean, primarily because often their life could be at stake, but more so even on a very concrete logistical point of view, schedules, going to the hospital, leaving the hospital, having side effects, taking care of this patient, of this person in the family, especially if this person is a provider of care. Some patients who are kind of middle age have kids of whom they're responsible, and parents that they're
Mm.
taken care of, and they're required to provide so much, and suddenly they are the ones who need help, at least momentarily. And so we have social workers, and actually the cancer practicing cancer nowadays in 2024 is not something an oncologist does by himself. There is a team behind the oncologist, and that team involves not only pharmacists and nurses, but also social workers, some services that provide help at home. We have even some volunteers that are involved in driving patients back and forth to their appointments. So there's a whole team to take care of these patients, and taking care of the family is an intrinsic part of taking care of cancer patients.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing as well that the doctor, not only that they obviously have central to a team that supports the family, but the doctor is also looked at as the not only the person that gives the information to the family, but is also responsible for the sort of overall care plan for the patient. The observation that I have is that one of the most difficult things would be to not only be technically capable of being a doctor with all of the nuances of that, but then to be adept at being able to speak to the family about the outcomes in a way that is compassionate, because everybody within that family is going to be receiving information differently. And I know from my experience, I had different doctors saying different things. And I remember one moment where I think it was an ear, throat and nose specialist for my father at the time. And he said, yeah, because he was seeing me for something else. And he said, oh, I've seen your father. He's not long for this world or something. He said, I know he's not long for this world. And I thought,
whoa,
I wasn't prepared for it. I was a young man. I was about, I don't know, I would have been 19 or 20 or something. And I just thought to myself, hold on, what does that saying mean again? And I'm like, oh, yeah, he's basically saying that he's going to pass. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So this idea of having this talent of being able to navigate different people, I imagine that's a challenge.
It is, but we learn. I think that with practice you learn, and you adapt. And seeing the number of patients we see, on every day, and day in day out, we eventually with some years of experience, you also get to be able to understand the patient and at least some of the family dynamics early on in the first appointments, so that you know how to speak as much as possible and adapt to the way to the patient and every family member. But it's still a struggle. Even for myself, I've been practicing for more than 15 years now, and still I have some cases where I am challenged and I don't know how to establish a good rapport with the patient and the family and say the things I need to say.
I imagine for anyone in that position, it would be a super difficult thing. But I thought we'd move the conversation to specifically around sort of cancer, and it seems to be quite prevalent. I see it a lot, anecdotally, of course. But I was looking up some stats, and I found the WCRF International talk about cancer being significantly higher in more developed countries. For example, there were an estimated 9,296,000 cases of cancer per 100,000 people in areas with very high human development, compared to 812,211 in areas with low human development. That was in 2022. The other thing that shocked me was, according to the World Health Organization, Australia has the highest age standardized cancer rate at 462.5 cases per 100,000, followed by New Zealand and Ireland, and US is ranking fourth with 367 cases per 100,000 people. So I have a feeling that part of this is as a result of our societies and our countries, the ones that I've just kind of suggested are probably better at early detection and screening, and there might be some stats that are skewed as a result of that. But I wondered what your thoughts were around those statistics, and
Yeah, I think cancer is very prevalent, and in Canada, I don't know Australian statistics, but I'm sure they're very similar. In Canada, we estimate that more or less 1 in 2 people, so 45%, more or less, of people will in their lifetime at least have one diagnosis of cancer in their lifetime, provided they live till their life expectancy, which is around 82 84 for men and women in Canada, and Australia. I think from last time I checked, it was very similar. So yeah, it's a very prevalent disease. Some of these high numbers are, as you said, are I think due to, and I think it's recognized, are due to the fact that we diagnose everybody. In some less developed countries, some people just pass away and nobody really knows why they passed away. There's no necessarily a biopsy to diagnose cancer is not a diagnosis you can make by imaging. You need to biopsy and send this piece of tissue to the lab. So you need some kind of minimal technology or some minimal health services to be able to put a name on a cancer and count that statistic. In some countries where you wouldn't have access to these things, or patients are so advanced, they just let them go, or they don't have the financial resources to be taken care of in a good healthcare system. So this is, I think, part of the reason. But there's no, despite that, I think there's no no doubt that the cancer is very prevalent, and modern societies have not helped reduce the cancer incidence. At least we are much better at detecting them early. Go ahead.
So this, yeah, okay. So that's sort of where I'm leading, and we talk about let's forget about the difference between developed and non-developed, but just in our modern society, let's talk to that. What are the primary factors, do you think, that are causing a rise in cancer outside of obviously a greater ability to detect them?
Yes, so the number of cancers is going up. So good news. Let me start by just a small bit of good news, which is yes, no, there is some good news. There is some good news.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about this a bit later, but overall cancer mortality is improving. So
Great.
despite the numbers are growing of cancer patients, but we are curing more of them than we ever did, and the cancer that we cannot cure, we have managed to chronicize cancer much more than we were able to in the past even few years. Patients with even incurable cancers live longer than they've ever lived. So that's a piece of good news. Another piece of good news is that smoking, tobacco smoking, which was historically the number one cause of cancer, is still the number one, but by less of a margin, and is going down in many countries. In many industrialized countries, the prevalence of smoking is going down. The trouble is, you have a 20-year lag between the change in the habit and the impact on cancer. So when you start smoking, it's only 20 years later that you get the cancers, vice versa as well. So when you stop smoking, for us to see it on a populational level, we probably need 20 years or so. So, but we already are seeing drops in cancers that are due to smoking, namely lung cancer, but also some other cancers like ENT cancers, like throat cancers, that were primarily due to smoking up to a few years ago. Now are due to HPV virus, which is not smoking, not due to smoking.
And obviously, this sort of idea between causation and correlation as well. Like, it's very difficult sometimes to determine. As an example, there's sort of this idea of red meat being a particular problem, and then others saying, well, no, it's just that red meat is associated. People that eat red meat or tend to be associated with eating all of these other things, and it's these other things that might be the issue, not the actual red meat itself. So there's these challenges in being able to determine is it actually this or is it that?
Definitely. Epidemiology, which is a science of establishing causation, is a complicated field, and I don't pretend to be an expert at all. If you look at large bodies, though, who have who have many epidemiologists look at all the available studies and come up with conclusions. So smoking, there's no doubt there. It's not a innocent bystander or questionable. It is smoking. It's causation. Red meat, from my understanding, the World Health Organization has classified it as a cause. It is not a random association or correlation. It is a cause, but to a certain extent, right? It explains a certain percentage of cases, and red meat is different than processed meat, right? So red meat carries around half the risk of processed meat if you look by number of grams consumed. So and it does increase a little bit the risk of mostly colon cancer. It has to do with a lot with the quantity of meat consumed as well.
So you also, I imagine, because this is a big one, and I don't know whether this is concluded but sugar as well. Is that another?
So as far as I know, sugar by itself is not a known to be a carcinogen. We don't we don't have a direct effect, but we know that obesity is. So if you consume sugar and you become obese, which is what sugar will lead you to eventually, have a higher body composition of fat, high triglycerides, which in themselves, fat is a inflammatory tissue, and just the presence of adipose tissue or fat cells produces cytokines and inflammatory conditions in the body that will promote, that are thought to promote at least some cancers.
So are there also incidences of lifestyle choices that we have as well that are considered factors? And these ones would be probably in some ways more difficult to determine than what we consume.
Yes, it's very difficult because it's something that happens over years and decades, right? The cancer is not something that develops overnight. So you need to look back into the behavior of people through decades, and people change and people move. And so how do you amass all this information in a reliable way? And people forget also. Questionnaires are notoriously unreliable because people have selective memories. People will often portray things as being perhaps a bit more positive sometimes than what they really are. So it's not easy to collect information and find causes for cancer. But epidemiologists have been doing this for a number of years. This is not an old science, but at least a science that has matured over a few decades. Since the pioneer is Sir Dall. He was given the title of Sir in Britain, Great Britain, because he established the link between tobacco and lung cancer. And this was probably one of the first milestones in epidemiology and created epidemiology. So now we know that around 50% of all cancers are avoidable. The other half is not avoidable. The other half has to do with age. So aging by itself it carries risk.
So in a sense, what I was saying before about the developed world, they would have a greater longevity statistically and a greater aging population. So that could actually be another reason why those stats are skewed towards to the developed world.
You're absolutely right. That said, though, however, when you look at these statistics, normally age is such a strong risk factor. In fact, it is the most important risk factor for cancer, but arguably for any disease, right? Heart disease, any diseases, happens more with age, right? And so cancer is one of them. And so normally statistics, when you look at stats from two different countries, a developed and a less developed country, normally they're age adjusted. This is like the basis of statistics, that it should be age adjusted. If you don't adjust for age, then nothing makes sense anymore.
So coming back to your comment about sort of this inflammatory response, the cytokines, all those types of things that happen internally in the body as a response to many different inputs. So I'm really interested in this idea of stress, and does it have a role to play in the development of cancer, and what does the kind of research say in this space? Because I know that you have a good interest in this area.
Yeah, it's a great question, and part of the reason why I got interested in this question a few years ago, and I researched it and presented on it a few times. Essentially, it's because of the patients. Patients ask this question routinely. People want to know why they had cancer, and many of them suspect, and some of them believe quite firmly, that it's the stress in their life, their relationship, their bad job environment, or some kind of stress that led to this cancer. And this is not an old question. This has been looked at through different angles. People in the lab looked at the effect of cortisone, which is one of the hormones you produce when you are stressed. So the effect of cortisone in a lab, in an animal model, for example, their immune system gets weaker. They don't heal as fast. There's a higher chance of cells leaving their initial space and going to another place, which is called metastases. So all these physiological mechanisms have been looked at and seem to correlate. Hormones of stress increase the chance of a cancer developing and growing. The trouble is, and theoretically all this makes sense, but the trouble is when you come to test it on humans and you try to measure stress and correlate it with disease or with cancer, you have trouble doing it, and most of the studies do not find a relationship. And so one category of easier trials, for instance, to do is ask people how much stress they have. You can ask them. You can take those numbers, like on a scale, for example, and follow those people and try to see if they develop more cancer or not. And these studies have been mostly negative. If you do them retrospectively, then they're flawed, because if you take people who already have cancer and tell them, "Have you been stressed recently?" chances are they're gonna score a bit higher than they would have if they had not.
And the idea of, whether are you stressed or are you not is quite a subjective
Exactly.
question. And what is the definition of stress? So, and I'm really interested in this idea that, someone can be stressed and have the same stressor as another, but it's the way that information is interpreted. It's the way those stresses are interpreted that affects your biology potentially quite differently. So maybe you talk to that a little.
Yeah, I think absolutely you're dead on. I think it's so subjective. To give you an example, it's a bit of a laughing matter, but not a laughing matter, but you can't help but smile. They did do a study. They say, well, going through divorce is a stressful experience. Let's see if people who go through divorce have a higher cancer rate in the years following, and that's a fairly easy thing to measure. Divorce is a binary event, and you can say, well, you went through divorce, okay, so do you have more cancer risk or cancer incidents in the years following the divorce, even up to 10 years following, because we think it's a and you don't find any effect, because to some people divorce is a negative event, and probably to other people it's a positive event if they come out of a toxic relationship.
So that sort of idea of this concept of hermetic stress, which I've heard about. So when I think about my own life, I think about all the things that I do to myself that are stressful. And to some extent, just even doing the podcast, notwithstanding this conversation is very relaxed and quite enjoyable, it can be stressful, right? So, but that is a hermetic stress, a stress that you enjoy doing. It's kind of growth, it's adaptive, it's not long-term and it's not a problem. Or going and doing exercise in the morning and absolutely smashing yourself, but then there are other stresses that seem to be more pervasive, more longer term problematic. And I think that's maybe more of the issue, right?
I think so. I think so. Defining stress is very difficult. It's subjective. It's personal. How much of an event, a same event, will have an impact on you depends a lot on the resources you have at the time of that living that stress. The emotions, the internal resources, your ability to rise above the stress or the external event, and also the social and the familial, social, external support when you're going through that stress. So because of all these factors, it's very hard to find a link or to conclude conclusively to a link between stress, even if it's a chronic stress, anxiety, and cancer. And perhaps the most important take-home message is, even if we have not been able to establish a direct link between stress and cancer, and that's the position of most medical authorities, there is a very clear relationship between chronic stress, anxiety, negative emotions, depression, and behaviors, mostly unhealthy behaviors, that people adopt to deal with those stressors and this anxiety. And all of the behaviors are essentially negative. Most of them are. So, or all of them are, unless you're clever and you're able to deal well with your stress. But most of us, myself included, if I have a bad day at work, I'm much more likely to grab a chocolate on my way home because it's comfort food. It's going to make me feel good. It's going to restore some of my dopamine that I have lost during my day of stress. So People who are going through a lot of stress will tend to not sleep as well, to drink alcohol, to eat unhealthy food. Stressed people usually will not go to the gym, will rather stay home and watch TV. So all these factors are clearly risk factors for cancer. So when you study people who go through stress in a well-designed trial, you have to take into account the negative behaviors, and when you do, you end up with nothing left, because the negative behaviors are so strongly correlated with cancer, that if there is a small biological effect, which is the cancer itself physiologically increases your cancer risk, we can't find it anymore, because it's overwhelmed by the smoking that you did or the alcohol
Yes.
that you drank
Yes.
to relieve that stress. So
Yes.
the one most important thing you can do short term is not to engage in behaviors that will give you short term relief, but will essentially be risk factors for many health issues, not only cancer, heart disease.
Other issues. You can replace cancer with a number of different issues, right? Yeah.
I would say with essentially most other issues,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
including mental issues.
Yes. Yes.
We know more and more that the brain is just happens to be another organ like every other organ that is affected. Brain health is affected by what we put in our mouth and our gut, right? Our gut flora. The connection between the gut flora and the brain now is a booming science, and it's very clear that you can induce depression in mice by giving them a fecal transplant. So give them cells from another mouse that had eaten fast food.
We said that there's no direct link. We can't find the direct link between chronic stress and actual cancer, but there are some maladaptive practices that occur which have a clear link to many different illnesses. So just
Exactly.
because we can't find the link between the stress and the cancer doesn't mean it's not there. And what the maladaptive practices are doing are alerting us to the fact that what this person has is a chronic stressor. And that's most likely why there are these maladaptive practices that are occurring. And not only that, these maladaptive practices are in and of themselves a contributor to the cancer. So it seems to me, I'm thinking, that it's like a double whammy. You've got the stress and it's ongoing. You cope with that stress through these, whether it be alcohol to soothe, all the ones that you've kind of mentioned. But, it's that stress and on top of it, the actual issue, additional thing that you're using to cope with that stress. Would that be?
That's how exactly my understanding is.
Yeah.
Very, very good summary.
Do you think there are any misconceptions about stress and health that we actually have out there that we need to dispel?
Having studied cancer and being a firm believer in evolutionary sciences, my understanding is that you have to find the root cause, and the root cause, when you go from one thing to the why of the why of the why, you end up essentially in the conclusion that we are not living in an environment in which we were designed to live.
Okay.
So it's like you're driving a Ferrari in a forest, and you're wondering why it's having so much trouble.
Yes.
It wasn't designed for that.
Okay.
It's not that the Ferrari is a bad car or the forest is a bad environment. It's just that they're not made for each other. And I think we were not made to live the life that we are living in most modern societies. Sitting now they're calling it the new smoking. The number of hours we're sitting is clearly not physiological. Now we thought it was just a matter of posture and muscles being not tense enough. We now think that sitting in itself is an inflammatory condition. So just having these muscles sit and not do anything for hours is possibly produces inflammatory cytokines. It is not something we were designed to do. We lived, as you know, and I think we had this discussion, you and I, at some point in one of our previous discussions, the idea that sapiens have been around for 300,000 years, and it's only in the last 10,000 that we have domesticated animals, and
Yes.
started agriculture, and the idea of sitting in the same place. And now it's even much more than our grandparents. Already our grandparents were not living the life that our ancestors many generations ago were living, but it's getting more and more abnormal, or furthest from our design, and
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
evolution is not catching up.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to put a bit of a bow tie on that last sort of. We're going to get into the sort of societal pressure side. I appreciate you've actually segued me nicely into that. But before that, I just wanted to sort of put a bow tie on that idea of sort of these maladaptive things that we have to combat the stress. I feel that there are ones that are socially acceptable and ones that aren't. And the socially acceptable ones are the ones that are really problematic because they're hard to unearth and they're hard to change. And I think about things like, because this podcast is all about making sure that we have a good balance between making money and having meaning and life satisfaction. And I think making money in some ways can lend itself to overwork potentially, being a workaholic, spending less time with your family for good, potentially good reason. It might be to advantage your family, but it's out of balance, and it could be as a response to chronic stresses in your life, that working is the coping mechanism. And so that is seen to be explaining, particularly in sort of male sort of archetypal culture, that he's a driven man, he's a, that sort of ideal, where he just may be actually overworking. And I'll say that the same for females as well these days as well, exactly the same sort of idea. We're, driven and all of that, but it's it can be a bit of an issue if you're not looking at it.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I fully agree with you. And the good news is that this generation, our generation to some extent, but the one after us, I think to a greater extent, are aware of this, are more aware of this than certainly our parents and our grandparents were. And I think that we're seeing it here, and I'm sure it's the same in Australia. It's a worldwide phenomenon, I believe, of this next generation, the newer generations, essentially being more aware of their well-being. And we see it in medicine daily. These new medical students, younger medical students and residents who are putting limits on what we could ask them as staff, limits that I could not dream of putting when I was a medical student or resident. I would, if they would tell me to spend 100 hours at the hospital, I would do it.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Which we did, by the way, as residents.
Yeah.
But today you try doing this try asking a medical student to stay a bit longer, or a resident, and you'll get a pushback. And some of my colleagues view this negatively, but deep down I feel there's some wisdom in this.
I think you make a really good point. This sort of generational divide where, the older generation looking at the younger generation saying, you guys aren't working as hard as we do. You're not as loyal. Did I include myself in the older generation as well? Because I'm still from old enough to know you sort of don't question. You just do. You do the hours. On these sort of cultural norms, overwork, the culture of drinking, and it's no big deal. Do you think they are issues as well that impact health?
Violating your physiology is
Yes.
what's unhealthy. I think there's a famous book that's called "The Body Keeps the Score." Probably seen this book. The idea that you don't violate your nature too much, whether physically and psychologically. At the same time, and as much as I understand the younger generation, as you've said, that they're looking for what they aligns with their values. At the same time, most people who succeed will tell you that in anything, in fact, in
Yes.
learning piano as much as in a career, there's an initial energy intense slope in getting in starting something and becoming good at something. It's not easy. Nothing is easy to master. And so there's a balance between both, right? There's a balance between doing enough to become good at something, and not abandoning too quickly, but at the same time finding something you're passionate about and you want to, and you're able to work, with not too much pain long term.
So when it comes to this society that is all about economic productivity and there's a fairly significant focus on money. in my mind, and I mean, of course, I'm a financial advisor, so I see this every day, right? So maybe that colors my world a little bit. But you know, talk to me around your view on that, and how this sort of focus on economic productivity and money and so on also leads into some of these side effects that we see, which then end up potentially causing more illness.
My understanding is that the trouble with assigning dollar signs to everything, and to putting money as a central value around which everything else is working, it has its pros, but I think one of its cons is that some of the most precious things are not quantifiable, and it's hard to put a number on something that example health. It's not easy to put it into a model, and one of the problems with economical Excel sheets is that most of them are short term, right? You're looking at a semester at a time or a trimester at a time, whereas something like health effects, most of them are very long term, and most of them, your health at age 70 is largely the function of what you did between 30 and 60. So and which Excel sheet is, or which company is taking this type of value into the equation? It's not in the nature of how our economical system is working. And other factors, I think that family, what we have here in Canada, and I'm sure the same in Australia, this younger generation we spoke about are looking very very aggressively in some cases to find a balance between family and work, and the amount of time you spend with your kids is not something that society puts a dollar sign on. It could certainly be cheaper for me to keep my kid at daycare forever, but the time I spend with my kid is something that society will benefit from 20, 30 years from now, but is not in any Excel sheet that's looking at the economical data of anything. So a lot of very precious things are not captured by our economical system.
No, I completely agree. I mean, and sometimes they are captured by our system, but not at the right rate. Valued. So, as an example, the discrepancy between, and notwithstanding the fact that there is a fairly significant, and as you'd know, amount of education that is required and responsibility being a doctor, but the nurses are very, very important in our societies, and I tend to feel that they seem to be marginalised from a financial perspective, and they have a huge role to play in the welfare of patients, as you'd probably well be aware.
100%, and it's something that is recognized more and more, and more we don't talk about the doctor being central to the care. It really is a team. It is a team, and the newest models of care that we are taught right now is that the patient is in the middle, and there are people around. There's a team around this patient. The patient is in the middle, and there's a doctor, a nurse, and each one of them contributes something that they're good at, and what they've learned, and it's a summation of all this that gives a patient a positive experience during their disease journey.
Mm-hmm. And Alain, I know previously we've had conversations before about your past, and I know that we talked about your move into medicine, which was done at the time as a response to wanting to make some change and really helping people. But I imagine through personal circumstances, which I'll let you share with us, whatever you wish to share, because I know it's a sensitive topic. But through personal circumstances, I think what you ended up doing is really very much relevant to some of your own experiences as you were growing up. So perhaps you can share with the listenership, with the audience, with the community, a little bit about your journey with cancer as well.
I'm happy to share my personal journey with cancer. So when I was in medical school, that was back in my early 20s. I was 23 at the time, finishing my last year of medical school, and I got diagnosed with a lymphoma, a Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer that is more prevalent in the younger men and women in their 20s usually. And so one morning I woke up with a lump in my neck, and I self-diagnosed that lump, and had a friend order some tests and found that this was Hodgkin's lymphoma. At that time, I was very interested in cardiology. I was already in medicine and aiming to be hoping to be a cardiologist, to become a cardiologist. And that diagnosis, I had to stop my medical studies for a year. I had to go through chemotherapy. My initial round of chemotherapy did not work as it should have. So Hodgkin's lymphoma is normally a good disease. One of the good cancers that is associated with a high, with a very high success rate and cure rate. But the fact that I had this early recurrence, put me in a different risk category. And in fact, I remember very clearly, and I was obviously reading compulsively about the disease and the outcome probability. At some point, and even the doctors were not that reassuring. The chance of beating the disease once there's a recurrence is significantly lower. But despite that, I got lucky. I would like to take credit for it, but I can't. I haven't done more than just go through the treatment plan suggested by my doctor, and so I got some extra treatments, and I finally, with quite a bit of luck, got to achieve a cure from this Hodgkin's lymphoma now more than 20 years ago. But it has definitely changed my life significantly, and so it's the main reason behind my change, the change of my career from cardiology to oncology. So I became an oncologist, obviously in the hope of being able to contribute something positive to patients going through the same experience with the background and my personal experience with cancer.
I mean, it's absolutely clear to me that, when you're touched with something so challenging at a very formative time in your life, that you move towards something that has a lot of meaning to be able to care for others that are in similar situations. Everyone's situation is obviously different, but how do you think the experience has made you a better doctor and has changed the way that you practice with your patients?
Having been a patient, so I remember how it feels to be on the other side of the chair, of the desk. The anxiety when it comes down to get results, the anxiety once you've done a scan and you can't wait to hear what the result is, because the result might mean that you will live or will die, something very significant. So I think I'm able to be a bit more sensitive to to what the patients are going through, and hopefully be able to deal with it better. And the one of the things also that I learned, and I try to convey to patients is that for a long time I was looking for the reason I got cancer, and most patients do. I think we mentioned this earlier, the why question, and yeah. If you look around, for example, in the specific case of Hodgkin's lymphoma, really it's a random event. At the end of the day, it's mostly a random event, and for most cancers, and I'm not saying that we should live carelessly because cancer is random. No, it isn't. I think there's something we can do. It's like driving a car, there's precautions you should take to not have an accident. But on an individual level, at the end of the day, it's mostly a random event. You should put the odds on your side, but once it happens, it's hard to look back and say, like, that's entirely my responsibility, or it's my fault, and so it isn't, and so it's a random event. And when comes the time to assign a meaning to this random event, it's not easy until, and that's what I went through, my journey with dealing with this, until I convinced myself that the meaning is something that I have to create. I will not find it anywhere. I could look, I could read, and I've done that, but I'm not going to find the meaning somewhere. The meaning is is mostly a personal one that you have to create from scratch. And each patient, and in fact, not only patients dealing with cancer, but I think anybody who's going through any kind of challenge or obstacles in life, most of the time, yes, there's a learning. If something, if it's due to a mistake or something like that you can learn of, all the better. You should learn from it. But beyond learning, I think that the meaning that you give to this to the negative event is something that you have to create. And what I did is partly to give a meaning, is to become an oncologist and hope to improve the life of my patients.
Can you perhaps share a little bit as well about, how your life has changed with the perspective of cancer as well? Like you talked to me previously about some of the things around just enjoying the simple things.
One of the things that comes to me very often, in fact, so every time I shower with a warm shower, I remember the time I had to shower in the hospital. I was in the hospital getting treatments for a whole month, and so I had to shower, and unfortunately they had cold water in the shower of the hospital, and I had to be attached to a pole because there was an infusion going on during the shower, and my mom and a nurse were on the other side of the of the curtains. It was not a good experience, showering, and so there are worse things in life. But having been through this, it's something that every time I take a warm shower, I remember that bad shower I had many years ago, and I obviously I'm grateful for it, and it makes me realize that essentially such a benign or meaningless thing like a hot shower or a nice meal with friends, or or something that we take for granted because we do it every day. The value of it is really up to you. You assign the value to it. It could be $1 million, or it could be nothing at all. It's a choice that you make to taste every bit of that hot shower, or not to, or to rush through it and complain about being late to work and run off to work, but or you can enjoy it and feel lucky that you were able to have a nice warm shower that morning. So that's one thing that I learned. But also I've learned something because I was 23 at the time, and essentially I had to come to terms with the fact that my life was in danger. There was a significant chance I was not going to make it long term, and historically, people with Hodgkin's before the medical era, the new medical era of treatments available, Hodgkin's has always existed, and other cancers have always existed. Life expectancy was between 2 and 3 years. So there was normally in any other era I would have been born. We shouldn't be having this conversation. So I'm grateful for that, but also other than being grateful is that I realized that nature is not as motherly as we want it to be. I want to see her. It's motherly. I think when we say Mother Nature, I think we're saying that nature is provides to us food, provides life to us, perhaps. But at the same time, nature is very indifferent to suffering, to our suffering, to our patients' suffering, even to our death, And so I feel that it's part of our duty as human beings to interfere with nature. And I think a lot of what we do and makes us human is that we interfere with the natural process of certain things to alleviate the suffering, because we place human beings as and human suffering and human experience as above nature.
It's in our nature to interfere with nature.
Absolutely.
In a sense.
And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to question nature, and
yes.
And when people say, well, naturally, if you do something naturally, if you eat natural sugar or do this natural, it's going to be fine. And what I tend to say is to my patients when they want to do natural things is cancer is natural, and there's nothing more natural than cancer. Animals have cancer. Cancer have always existed, and so. What's unnatural is treating cancer and curing cancer. That's unnatural, and so that's why I believe in medicine. I believe less in some of the alternative medicines that are sometimes provided and labeled as being natural. I'm not saying they have no value or no worth. That's they're not worth studying, at least. But per se, because it's natural, that it's right is
not necessarily correct.
No.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm definitely hearing in the irony of this is that you've looked at your particular experience and, in a sense, you've shifted your mindset and made sure that there was a meaning and a rationale behind what why what happened so to you happened. So you end up not having a chronic stressor of that experience, looking back on it as being a chronic stressor, but something that actually has catapulted you to where you are. But then also I hear a very strong theme of gratitude that you have in your life for the things that you do based upon what has just happened. So perhaps, when we talk about a family that has been exposed to an illness of any sort, what are the things that you would sort of suggest as strategies to cope with a terminal illness? What are the kind of key things that the family can do to support that person?
When somebody is terminal, the way we approach this as oncologists is essentially we want to prolong life. We use our therapies to prolong life, but our priority is actually, in many cases, not necessarily to prolong life at any cost, but to preserve quality of life. And so our priority when somebody is terminal is to optimize each one of the days left. We often don't know how many days are left or how many weeks or months, but we know it's a limited amount. And so we want to encourage the family and the patient to live fully each one of those days. It could be things as simple as eating your favorite type of ice cream to visiting people that you want to see for the last time, or other experiences that you want to live. I think one of the most important things in going through all this process is with serenity. It's a bit like the serenity prayer. I'm sure you know the serenity prayer of, give me the courage to change the things I can, and the serenity to accept those I can't, and the wisdom and the knowledge, in fact, to know the difference. And I think part of the reason why some families and some patients do not go through this with serenity is that they're unsure that everything that could have been done has been done. And that's something that I insist often, and to the extent where sometimes I will offer families who are not comfortable with how things are going, and they're not moving along in a serene fashion. They're angry at where things are heading, whether it's the patient, the family, or both. I will sometimes go out of my way to offer them a second opinion with another doctor somewhere else, not because I have a doubt about the treatment I'm giving, mostly because I think that they need to be convinced 100% that they're getting the optimal care, that this is really something that's bigger than us. I think we have this ability, human beings, to accept natural disasters. It's known in psychology that the same harm could be done by natural disaster versus by another man, and you will heal much better from the first trauma because it's kind of God sent. It's not made by human. So I think it's important for them to know that this is beyond what humans can do. Families and patients, and to understand that this is a natural event bigger than us. We have to make the best of it, and that we are lucky to be living in the in the best time of history to have cancer, and that at least if we cannot alleviate cancer, cure cancer, we can alleviate the suffering to a great extent. This was not the case for the essential part of human history. People would die of cancer behind a tree, suffering and crying out pain. I think God's gift to humanity was morphine. at least you can reduce the pain, and go in a serene way. Maybe I can finish with one a little piece of slightly funny, but kind of there's quite a bit of truth to it. It was an editor of the British Medical Journal who wrote that cancer is the best way to die. And it's a bit of a shocking title. Cancer is the best way to die. It's a bit shocking, but then he goes through the causes of death, and he says, would you rather die of a neurological problem like dementia or Parkinson, or would you rather die from a sudden death, heart attack, you don't have time to say bye-bye to anybody, or would you rather die through organ failure, which is cardiac, kidney, or liver failure, which is essentially ups and downs. You don't know when the final down is going to come, but it's kind of coming, but you're just losing. Whereas cancer often gives you our ability to prognosticate precisely with cancer is actually the disease where we're most able to give a precise diagnosis.
You've explained something incredibly well, Alain, that swinging back to my father, one of the things that he chronicled and that I at the time probably didn't deal with all that well. I was happy that he was able to accept his illness, but I also found the comment that he made around that cancer is like a disease of the saints. It gives me time. I get to see my sons grow up. I get to see these things, which is absolutely true. Was something I felt challenged by when he kind of communicated it. But I really understand that now, and I think it talks to very much your point around it, and also it talks to the point of those that are in it and that are able to make meaning from it and have an ability to have a mindset shift around it. There's some utility or some value, I think in that. So I really do appreciate. I'm mindful of time. I could speak to you about this for hours, I think. Let me just say as well that I'm incredibly proud of what you're doing there as a relative of yours and a cousin of yours. I'm incredibly proud of what you do, and it's amazing that you not only were able to share your story to the Australian audience, but I hope to the Canadian one as well, and to our family. I'm looking forward to sending this one through as well. But it's been really helpful, I think, to talk about something that ties us all, regardless of where we're from. This idea of illness that happens, making sure that we're okay with our health and stress. So I just wanted to ask you before we kind of wrap it up, what keeps you up at night at the moment, and what's still to do for you in your work?
Oncology is booming. Oncology is truly booming. It's now the area where there's the most money spent by all pharmas and governments. It's the disease of the century. So it's moving at a very fast rate. And to be honest with you, it's a challenge for us oncologists and healthcare professionals to keep up with the amount of novelty that's coming our way. Every cancer now is being categories and subcategories are being created for every cancer. There's
Yes.
drugs arriving on the market every day. So that's a very positive thing for patients and for us, because it's exciting. We feel like we can do something new. I know that I'll be treating the same cancer probably a year from now. I'll treat it differently than how I'm treating it today. That's how fast things are going.
Yeah.
And it's exciting because the increments are rarely very large one by itself, but the summation of small increments has brought oncology from very far, many decades ago to today. So it's an exciting time to be doing the work I'm doing. And maybe I'll finish on this if you want. Part of having been through this disease, and part of perhaps yourself having seen some family member, very close family member going through it, it serves as a reminder of our mortality and our finite life, and somehow the urgency to live. The importance of today and tomorrow, and the importance of making sure that every day is used to the best we can, and especially to orient and to make sure that every day is bringing us towards the life we will want to have had. I don't know if it's if I express myself properly.
No, that's very, very, very clear. I completely agree. I mean, you couldn't have expressed how I feel about my own life. Since one of the impacts of it for me has been really that just making sure that I'm doing the best I can. And like you say, we sometimes forget, and it's good to be reminded. Yeah. Well, thanks again. I can't end it without asking you the same question that I asked everyone at the end. What is your spirit animal, and why is it your spirit animal?
My spirit animal.
Your spirit animal. Yes.
You will laugh, okay?
Okay. It's been a heavy topic, so let's laugh.
You will laugh. I'm in love with camels. I love camels.
Yeah,
You didn't expect that. No, but
No.
I'm from Egypt. I grew up.
I'm
I grew
aware.
up. I was very affected by my childhood, and I've always thought that camels have they have a majestic walk, and they're so resilient. They can spend weeks on in the desert with no food, no drink, nothing. They're so strong, and so yeah, I unfortunately they're not very intelligent. Their brain is
Well, that doesn't fit. I don't know if it fits, Alain.
their
I'm sorry, mate, but
their brain is very small compared to their body.
funny thing. We know a lot about camels in Australia. We've got a huge amount of feral camels in Australia. Apparently, like in terms of compared to the globe, we've got a huge amount. So.
I know you have a type that's a bit different than ours, but
yes.
I've seen pictures. I've shown pictures to the kids. Every time we go to Egypt, I put the kids on camels next to the pyramids. So I can't tell you if it's a love of my. I can't tell you if it's a love of the animal or of my childhood association with the animal or some mixture of the.
Well, no one's ever said camel, so you've made me laugh as well. So I'm very happy to end our podcast on that note. It's fantastic. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.